All right. Hi, everybody. I apologize that I am late here. I had a little bit of technical difficulties, so thank you for sticking around and bearing with me. Let me go ahead and open this up. So happy Saturday to everybody. Hi, Jen. Linda, I see you're on as well. So excited to have everybody on. So I will just go ahead and dig right in since we're already running a little bit behind. And again, thank you so much for your patience. This is my first class, and like I said, had a little bit of trouble figuring it out. So excited to get started. I think we're recording automatically here, so all good there. My name is Sarah Seeger. I am a certified transformation coach and Reiki practitioner, and I'm excited to talk with you today about boundaries. So I work with a lot of amazing women to really empower them to show up as the best, most authentic versions of themselves. And it seems that we always have a bit of a theme that starts to come up in this work around boundaries. So today, what I have in store is want to talk about, first of all, why having boundaries isn't really second nature for us a lot of the time. We'll talk through the different types of boundaries that we can set, why they are important, and indications that you may need to establish a boundary. And then, what you can say to really feel comfortable setting boundaries gracefully. And then finally, kind of what's in it for you. So I know we have a lot to cover. Before we dig in, I would love to hear, since we have a smaller group on, from everyone on the call, what the biggest thing is that you're kind of hoping to get out of this class, or the main reason that you joined, if you guys are comfortable sharing.
Well, this is Jessica. I'm really excited about this. I just happened upon the class, and it's just actually very fitting for right now in my life. Just trying to figure out how to. My daughter's turned 16, and so I need to be able to let her feel like her own power, and one, I want to make sure that I'm showing her how to set boundaries well by
Yeah.
doing it myself.
Great.
Yeah, and then also just I haven't been great at it in my life, so I'm
Mhm.
excited to be able to do better with it. So looking
Good.
forward.
I love that. All right. Thanks so much for sharing, Jessica.
Thanks.
Anybody else want to share? Let me see if I can get the chat open here. Jen says, feeling guilty for saying no to a loved one. Yes. Yeah,
Yep.
we will definitely cover that, because I think guilt is a big reason why we don't set boundaries.
Yeah.
Linda, are you there? Do you, anything that you want to share? Either in the chat box, or you can come off mute. I'm also happy to take you off mute if you need, or you can just listen. So either way, if you end up wanting to share something, just go ahead and type it in, or feel free to come on in and join us. There's a lot of reasons, right? Like why we don't set boundaries, why it's kind of difficult. I understand that it can feel really challenging. I'll also keep this open at the end from 4 to 4:30. If there are any specific scenarios or questions that I'm able to help with, definitely, willing to jump into that. But want to kind of talk a little bit about, what a boundary is to get started. So I really look at boundaries almost as like a self-honoring agreement, either inside of yourself or with another person, that overall really supports your well-being and comes from a place of love. So when we tolerate negative behavior or fail to get our needs met, we can very easily end up building resentment, or eventually, pulling away from others. And even with ourselves, we can really start to create blocks, to between us and what we really desire. So one of the most powerful lessons that I've learned around boundaries is, really having the courage to communicate our needs and set a boundary is so much more loving than just pretending something is okay when it really isn't okay with us, right? When we don't set boundaries, we are essentially allowing people, to do things that may not be okay, get away with behaviors that aren't okay, just, continue to do things that rub us the wrong way or that can trigger us, which in turn can make us really resentful, frustrated, angry, right? But when we look at it from the perspective that we really have a choice, we have a choice to be loving and generous and crystal clear with those around us, with one, what works for us, and two, what doesn't work for us. So I like to really boil it down to those two simple kind of filters. So often we just assume that people, should know better, right? Whether it's your boss, a coworker, a family member, a friend, your partner, your kids. And that can really cause us to get frustrated. But if we think, what if people are really just doing the best they can? What if we can have compassion and assume that the people in our lives are doing their best and they're not intentionally trying to be off-putting? It can really help make our lives a little bit better, a little bit easier. So thinking about what boundaries need to be in place for me to really stay in my integrity and make the most generous assumptions about the people in my life. We are all here to learn and to grow. It's natural to experience growing pains with people that you care about, but the key word is growing and not pain. So, setting boundaries is a big part of that. So just a little background on myself and my experience with boundaries. I used to be a people pleasing extraordinaire for a long, long time, when I was really, afraid to disappoint anybody, fall short. I actually began to really love stepping up and being the go-to girl, over giving, the people that people could always count on in an instant to be there, to drop everything, no matter what, right? And essentially I was, overextending myself with zero boundaries to ultimately, externalize my worth, hustle for my worth, as I often say. So, this was an unconscious belief, really deeply rooted, that doing all the things, going above and beyond, made me somehow more lovable, right? It made me good. It made me feel needed. So does that resonate with anybody else here? Yeah. So, I think as we grow up, get older, I think it becomes time that we really realize, like, we're not getting some gold star, right? Every time we're shouldering this burden from somebody else. And you know, every time we do something that we don't ultimately want to do, we're kind of out of integrity with ourselves. Every time you do something with an expectation attached, it's those times that you do the thing, that you really didn't have time to do, you really didn't want to do, have the bandwidth to do, and then, you don't get the appreciation or the thanks that you were maybe anticipating. That's the barometer, I think, that really shows that you probably shouldn't have done the thing. Many of us have been really trained this way and have adopted this practice. Everyone will love me if I just go with the flow, or if I just do this thing, if I don't speak up, if I don't have needs, essentially, right? And that's not fair. We don't want to face or acknowledge that, everyone doesn't have to like us. And it's actually a lot more important to cultivate genuine self-worth, genuine self-love from a place that's separate from others' approval. But that seems a lot harder, right? But that's the actual work. So, do any of you on the call kind of identify as a people pleaser?
I would say that I definitely have that in me, but only for certain people. So I have a very specific group of, people that are close to me that I'll like do exactly what you're talking about, like above and beyond, make sure things happen, and even way overextending.
Yeah.
But then when it gets beyond that group, I guess probably because it's just too much for my head to handle, I'm like, whatever.
Right.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
not worried about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Hey, Linda, how are you?
Fine. Sorry about all that. I was in the car doing something, extending my boundaries.
Oh, oh, good. Well, this was
So
very timely.
your description is perfect. That is what I would have said in the very beginning, was just, the people pleasing and doing over functioning is what somebody said,
Yeah.
constantly over functioning.
Yes. Yes. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's, it can be so incredibly freeing when we can learn how to disappoint other people. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Glennon Doyle at all, the author. So Glennon Doyle, she wrote a few different books. Her most recent is called Untamed. And one of my favorite quotes in the book is simply, we can do hard things. So, everyone on this call has the capability to do this. It's just a matter of understanding a little bit more of how. So, something I'd really like everyone to reflect on, as they walk away, where are you giving or overextending yourself for the wrong reasons? It's less about what we do, I believe, and more about why we do it. So, even now, kind of take a moment and reflect, where are you giving or overextending yourself with kind of a tied expectation, right? What do you really want when you're doing that? What do you really need when you're doing that? So you guys can take a moment and think about that now if you'd like, and feel free to share. And there may not be one particular area that jumps out at you. For me, there was a lot, a lot of different areas. Anything jumping out to you guys?
Probably acceptance and validation.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, for me, it would be the relationship with my ex-husband, or my daughter's father, and ex-husband, and he's very unstable and wanting to do certain things that the attempt is that maybe this will be the thing that stabilizes him.
Mm.
And knowing that that's work that he has to do, and having to I guess Linda's point, accept that it may not end up well for him.
Yeah.
And that's really hard because he's got mental illness and all of that kind of stuff.
Okay, absolutely. So it's almost just kind of like that, like hope to fix, right? Like if I just do this, then maybe that will make things easier. Maybe that will fix it. Yeah, that's a good share. Jen, anything for you jumping out?
A lot of times it's just freaking easier to get it done with. Like, I know it's not ideal in the long term, but I always think it's like training a really stubborn puppy. And do you want to spend 2 years on it, or do you just want to give them the cookie and get on with your day? So I know that's cumulative, but with some strong people, it is so much energy to constantly push back when you don't want that person out of your life.
Yeah.
That's where I notice it. And as an empath, the negative feedback of feeling no feels awful inside me. It's a lot of work when I end up just saying, I'll just spend the weekend by myself.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I agree. I think I actually took your class, Jen, on the empath class that you recently did, and loved it.
Cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it really resonated with me. And I think that, a lot of the clients that I work with are empaths as well. And I think the empaths typically can have that pull to people please, because it's when people are happier, we're not having to absorb all of that. But then we just create this inner storm inside of ourselves anyway. At least it's our own.
I know I'm trying to practice what I preach, but it's just, that's where I notice it. It's a lot of energy that it takes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
That's huge.
Good. Well, thank you guys for sharing that. So it's, I think a big piece of this too is really getting clear about, what we want in those situations. And of course there are going to be times, right? If you truly want to help, if you have the capacity, you have no expectations tied, you don't seek validation, recognition, praise, acceptance, then great, right? Do the thing. But really, reflect on that. Reflect on, why am I doing this? Why am I pulled to do this? Is anybody here familiar with the Enneagram?
Mm-mm.
So the Enneagram is a personality test, and it's based on a 9 system, or a 9 number system. And a lot of people who are pulled to really people please and have weak boundaries are Enneagram 2s. So if any of you are Enneagrams 2s, I was going to say, just know that that's
How do you spell that?
It's ENNEAGRAM.
It's funny that you say that, because I'm on this site called Truity or something, but it's basically, I had done it for a work thing, and the Myers-Briggs is what they're using. But a thing popped up when I checked it yesterday about Enneagrams.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I can definitely share a test that's real easy to take. It's free, and it
cool.
will surface 3 different types, and then you can kind of read through them all. And there's usually one that really resonates. But I love the Enneagram. I'm actually going to do a few classes on it
Cool.
on my own. So yeah, I'll keep you guys posted.
Please do.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, use that why filter when you think about, when you say yes, when you say no. So, at this point, I feel like it's everyone's thinking like, well, great, boundaries are so good. If that's the case, why do they feel so hard? Why aren't they second nature? Right. So I think the first and foremost thing is, no one teaches us how to have boundaries, that's why I loved your share early on, Jessica, around, setting an example for your daughter, because a lot of us, that wasn't the case for us, right? In fact, it's more likely the opposite has been modeled and celebrated. And I often think about, like, whenever you sit and hear like a eulogy, and at a funeral, and all the wonderful things, right, that people have said about them, women in particular. And, it's like, she was such a selfless person. She, truly put everybody else's needs in front of hers. She'd give you the shirt off of her back. She never complained. She would drop, everything at, at that, at any sign if anyone needed anything, right? Like, that's a lot. It's a lot. We are allowed to have our own needs. It's okay to meet your own needs. I ideally want everybody on this call, or what even watching the replay, right, to be at the top of your list. But in the meantime, if you can just make it onto the list, like, I'll take that as a win, right, depending on where we're really coming from. So that's a big one. Another reason that we don't set boundaries is, there's often a lot of fear involved, and I'd be interested to hear from you guys, what has held you back? What's that fear? I know for me, it was a lot of things like, fear of pushing people away, coming off as selfish. I think probably the biggest thing was, the fear of people not liking me or loving me as much. If I spoke up and started to have boundaries. Is there anything that jumps out to you guys that you'd like to share?
I think hurting other people is one thing, not being there for them. And like, I think that's part of the empath thing, but it's just a matter of, not being able to, like, if someone not being able to judge, if someone really needs something and this is like the last straw and they're actually going to, like, something terrible is going to happen.
Sure.
That.
Yeah. I think just fear of the unknown too, right? Is like a big one. If this is not, if this is kind of uncharted territory, again, right? Like, we can be scared that the person will be hurt or mad at us too, scared that the relationship will end. But, most of these things are stories, things that our reptilian brains are kind of telling us to keep us safe, to keep us in our comfort zone, because we know what to expect in our comfort zone. So, we really have the opportunity to push back here. And, we don't have to believe everything that our brains tell us, right? So as you kind of go through some of those fears, and that might be a good takeaway, to really reflect on like, what are all the things I'm really afraid about around boundaries? And then go back and ask yourself, is that really true? Or am I giving this person enough credit? Am I giving myself enough credit? What is true? What is a story? But what is scarier, I think, than all the fears, whether real or made up to keep us safe, is, being in situations that don't serve us, or tolerating behavior, that feels really hurtful. So, for relationships to grow, again, there are going to be growing pains. The other person may very well get hurt or get angry. But you are not ultimately responsible for their reaction. You are responsible for communicating honestly and clearly and with love. That's your part of it. And that's where your responsibility really ends, right? How they react to it, you are not responsible for. So, we are successful women, right, who are getting so much done in life, doing so much for those people in our lives. But, if you're doing it at the expense of yourself, if you are not able to really put yourself on your own list, let alone at the top of the list, because there's no room, that's not the best way to fill our cups, right? That's not really going to be serving us. And there's this drive, I think, that many of us have, to be all things to all people, and that inability to really say no to others, to do what you want and really prioritize your own preferences. And I think when it comes down to it, it's like knowing our own preferences, to find that balance, to be good moms, good daughters, good human beings, and also being a good advocate for ourselves. There is a place that exists in the middle. Our capacities are high. We are, capable, efficient, smart. But you get to say no simply because you don't want to do something, right? You don't need to have a huge reason. You don't need to have like a huge justification and give all this context, right? I think that there's a misconception about what it means to be your best self. And it's not overgiving all day, every day. It's being discerning, and it's choosing really mindfully and knowing yourself well enough to be able to say no with ease and with grace. So I'm curious to know, how many of you feel a solid connection with your intuition or your inner knowing? Yeah, right? How often do you use that to determine what you want to do, in terms of, do I want to go to dinner with this person? I mean, that's kind of not really happening a ton right now. But, how often do you tap into your intuition, that inner guidance, that inner knowing, when you get asked to do something? Like, probably not a lot, right? I think
Yeah.
we usually have this idea that like that's what we kind of reserve that for, big things and big decisions. And really, you can tap into that for anything, and really start to flex that muscle around intuition with things even as simple as, do I want to wear a black shirt or a blue shirt today? And start to like feel into that yes and that no. And then continue to step up and use it with things like, hey, do I want to do this thing that this person is asking me to do? And then listen for the answer, right? And if it's a yes, then great, do it, right? If it's a no, really connecting to that and understanding that, you want to honor yourself and what you don't want to do. So, I think that, as we know, there's a payoff, right, to not setting boundaries, but really starting to recognize, where you get validation, what's in it for you. But, it's okay, right, to let others kind of show up for us as well, right? Asking others for help and receiving, I know, can be a really big struggle for a lot of us. A lot of us are used to just doing and, being the doer all the time. But there, again, needs to be a balance. So, practice receiving, because as much as you love helping people, when it's genuine, people love helping you in return. So, being able to really let them, I think is a really amazing gift that we can give. Any questions on this, or any other shares that you guys have?
I have a question about the practicing the intuition. I know that's kind of just a side note, but if you
Yeah.
are there, yeah, I don't know that I'm sometimes tuned in and sometimes I have no idea what I really want. Do you have any exercises, or anybody have any exercises?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I think the first thing in terms of tapping into my intuition is like getting out of the head, right? Getting out of the logical mind, the thinking mind, the hamster wheel. So a lot of times what I will do, like as I was first encountering my intuition and really making that connection is, do you meditate often?
I haven't been able to meditate yet. I'm very ADHD, and so it's hard for me to like do typical meditation.
Yeah.
So that's probably something I need to figure out too.
Yeah. Well, something that I find is really helpful is sometimes I'll just do like I call it a brain dump, where all of those thoughts that are like running through your head, just get them all out on paper, either make a list or just
I've got my bullet journal that I'm writing in right
oh,
now,
perfect.
taking
Yeah.
notes.
Yeah.
So perfect. Okay, brain
Yeah.
dump.
So just stream of consciousness, because I think a lot of times there's, we don't have the space to get quiet.
Yeah.
Because there's just too much that exists. And so when we can clear out some of that and get it onto paper, that for me is really helpful in quieting the mind. And then even just, so if meditation isn't for you, like even just doing some breath work, doing some box breathing, and then just really feeling into, things just even like, to start, like, my name is Jessica, and feel in your body what that yes kind of feels like.
Oh,
And
okay.
then it's like, my name is Joe, and then feeling in your body what that feels like. So it's different for everybody. I think for a lot of people, I find that it's the yes can feel very expanded, like expansive, almost like a pull forward, or like it just feels more peaceful, and a no is kind of like constricting. So
Cool.
I kind of find like, it's like, for me, a yes feels like like the out breath, right? Like kind of just like relaxed. And a no feels more like an in breath. So I know that might
Cool.
sound kind of odd.
No,
And
that actually makes sense. Yeah.
I think it's
Thank you.
different for everyone. There's also something you can do where you kind of like in a mirror, your yes, sometimes there can be a little bit of a pull forward, your no is a little bit of a pull backward. So
Oh,
you can
wow.
play around with some things like that. But I think even just, whether you cultivate that really deep connection with your intuition, I think it's even just the practice of the pause, right? To be like, do I want to do this? I think, so often we're just like, we get asked to do something and we just say, excuse me, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Like,
Right.
I don't have anything on the calendar on Wednesday. Yeah, I can do that. But it's like, do I want to do that?
Right.
And sometimes it's like, again, like looking into the why.
Okay.
Like, oh yeah, I'll give you an example. So I had a friend of mine who recently broke her leg, and she has two little kids at home, and she's a single parent. And I was like, oh, I'm going to help her. I'm going to make a bunch of meals for her and drop them off. And I started going down this path of like so big and so bold, right? I'm going to make like 12 different casseroles, and I'm going to label them and print the instructions and put them on there. So, and I'm envisioning her beautiful freezer with like everything in it. And then I start like, oh gosh, like, so I got to go to Schnucks now, and I have to do this and I have to do that. And like going down, and I'm starting to stress myself out. And so I said, okay, hold on. of course we want to help our friend, right, who broke her leg, who
Right,
needs
right.
the help. But then it's like finding the balance. So it's like, okay, what can you really do? Like, what is your actual bandwidth? And it's like, well, I can go to Trader Joe's. I know she loves like salads. I'll get a couple of those pre-made salads. I'll make one casserole for her that's like super easy. And then I did a few other things, but like put in a load of laundry for her. And
Right.
so it's like that was enough, right? So it's like, those are the types of things where it's like feeling into like, am I giving too much here? And it was like, yes, like, yes, you
Yeah,
definitely
that's so
are.
relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. So just kind of like feeling into like, either do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Or like, where's the middle ground? Right.
Yeah.
That made
That's
me
great.
laugh
Yeah,
because
that's funny.
it's sometimes I get like really enthusiastic about something and I'll be like, oh, that's so cool. Okay, I can do this and I can do that and I can do that. And I like get all excited about it and commit to all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I actually have to do it,
Yes.
it's a like, what was I thinking? How am I ever going to fit this in with everything else? That kind of thing. And
Yeah.
so somebody one time gave me this advice that when like I have a lot of work stuff and it'll sound good because it's a month in the future and surely by then I'll have more time,
Right.
so I commit and I'm a person that if I commit, I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
There's just I don't back out of stuff. So what they said is that imagine that it's tonight. Would you want to do that tonight?
Yes.
And it's like, then you're standing there going, oh, I'm really tired. And the idea of going to this that's going to be all evening after working all day, it helps make it, because how is it going to be any different next month than
Yes.
how I feel today?
That's really cool.
That. Yeah, that's such great advice. I definitely agree. And I think there's also, I mean, some things obviously we need to commit to ahead of time. And then some things you can say, I'm not sure what my schedule is going to look like in a month. If I'm available, if it turns out that I'm unable to commit, but if it turns out I'm available that week, would it be too late for me to help? If it turns out I'm available that day, would it be okay for me to join then? And then sometimes that, because I know for me, just some of the times these things that I commit to, like I'm the type of person, I really like to have like flexibility and fluidity. And if I feel kind of like obligated or in a corner, then I don't want to do the thing suddenly. So I think that's one of those things I find it just really serves me much better to be able to say, hey, is that something you need an answer on right away? Or do I need to let you know right now? Or can I let you know later when I have some time to like look at my calendar and see how things feel, right? Instead of that instant, like, oh yeah, I can do that. Like I do everything, moving kind of away from that identity and being able to like give ourselves some space, right? To like feel into what we want to do. So good. I love that. That's a great share. Okay, cool. Well, so we'll keep booking here. We'll move on to types. So creating boundaries, is important, right? We've established that. And I look at it as, really having that, I think I've said it like 4 or 5 times now, balance, right? Finding the balance, the harmony, and that can be in all areas in life with, with work, with family, within ourselves. So when we hear about boundaries, I think we oftentimes think of other people, but we need to also have boundaries with ourselves. So we'll first talk about internal boundaries, or boundaries that we just need, or rather, boundaries we get to establish with ourselves. Thinking about, do you keep your word to yourself? Do you often break your word with yourself to appease the people around you, to do something for somebody else? You say you're going to go to the gym, but then somebody calls and has a crisis, needs something. So you go to the rescue, right? And you don't go to the gym. Instead, you do, the thing. Or let's say you set a date with yourself and that you're going to go to the gym, and then you just don't feel like going to the gym. And so you don't go to the gym, right? I think to your point, Linda, it's like when you said earlier, like when I commit to something, like I'm showing up for it. But I think that there's a really important opportunity for us to reflect on, are we giving that same amount of commitment to ourselves? So that, I think, is what I mean primarily for the first part of internal boundaries, is just like having the same commitment, right? Getting ourselves toward the top of our list. Like if we say we're going to do something, like we are going to do that for ourselves. And I think, again, a big help for me is not the what, but it's the why. Right? Why am I doing this thing? Why do I want to go to the gym? And make that why a positive thing, right? Because I want to get stronger and I want to think about things that you're moving toward, not what you're moving away from. Because a lot of the things I think that we think about we should be doing for ourselves are, if they're fear-based, we're going to have more resistance to doing those things because our brain just picks up on the fear part of it. It doesn't, it knows that it needs to like move away from that and avoid that. So like, it's like the difference between like going to the gym because, a negative, I guess, could be, I have to go to the gym because I hate the way I look in all my clothes, right? If that's your why, you're probably not going to end up going to the gym. If you focus on the positive why, something that you're attracted to, and it's like, I want a healthy heart. I want to be strong. I want, those things that you're attracted to, or I want to look hot in my everything in my closet, right? Focus on the positive, and that can make a huge difference. So internal boundaries I believe are just as important as the boundaries with others. But then there's another, excuse me, type of internal boundary as well. And it's with another person, but it's almost like an agreement that we make with ourselves to kind of modify a relationship. So, for example, you may have a negative friend, right, who complains all the time. It can be extremely draining. Perhaps you've even ask them to maybe be more positive and they haven't adjusted, whatever it is, right? But you're not able or ready to completely sever the friendship. So instead, you can make an internal boundary with yourself to kind of protect your own energy. And let's say instead of talking to this person every day, you talk to them once a week. Or instead of making plans with them every week, you make plans with them once a month, right? It's nothing that you need to like announce, right? Or like verbalize to them to say like, hey, I want to spend less time with you as a friend. But it's just something that that you need as an internal boundary. So just taking that inventory and understanding, again, what's working for you, what's not working for you, and then adjusting, right? It's really, again, just about prioritizing yourself. Everybody tracking with that? Any questions on that? Okay, cool. So we've got the internal boundaries, and then, obviously there are external boundaries. I think this is what most of us think of when we think of boundaries. There are a lot of, these are verbal requests, from another person. So say you have, a relative who is always asking you, so are you dating anybody yet? Or, what's going on with your career? Have you found a job yet? I know you got laid off, and it's like, no, well, that's okay. It's like these intrusive questions kind of laced with a tone of judgment. You want to or have to be around them, but you keep kind of building up this resentment whenever these questions or this line of questioning comes up. And that's a time where it's ready, you're ready to set a boundary. So we'll get into some different examples of how to do that really shortly here. But who deals with like those types of boundaries, like these like conversational type of boundaries of like, this isn't like, I'm not comfortable with this, right? Yeah. So, politics, I think, is another big one, right? Around like conversational boundaries, just subjects, topics that that don't feel good or that put you on the spot or that, you don't want to partake in. And then the other one, similarly, to the internal boundaries, is our energetic boundaries. So, those limits on what you can and cannot give. Things, energy that you would prefer not to be around. What you like to do and what you don't like to do. It's crazy to think that's like, we don't have to do things that we don't want to do. Of course, there are things that we, that we do because it's the right thing, that may not always be like, oh, I can't wait to go, sit at my grandmother's house and drink terrible coffee and while she doesn't say anything, and those are the things that we're going to do, right? But overarchingly, we should be doing things that are lighting us up, right? That feels like that visceral yes inside. So, different relationships obviously require different types of boundaries, but they all require boundaries, right? It can feel hard, especially at first. And then, when someone pushes back, it just means that you have to maybe draw it several times, but it is our job, it is our responsibility. So is there any particular area that you feel needs attention most when it comes to putting a boundary into place?
For me, it's family, close family.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's a big one. Yeah. So we'll get into how. So I'll make a note of that and give some examples. Anybody else? Anything that pops up?
Well, for me, it's work. I really love what I do and I really get immersed in it. And so it spills over into other parts of my life. And then I'm scrambling in those parts of life to make up for how much time I'm overcommitted in work life.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that happens a lot as well. Okay, good. Thank you for sharing. Okay. So now we're going to get into a little bit about, knowing when to set them, right? So when we don't have healthy boundaries in a place, we often, we get pulled into setting bad boundaries. Our need to, draw boundaries is really based on our feelings, right? So, what feels okay, what doesn't. So when we don't have really clear, healthy boundaries in place, we can a lot of times get pulled into like more indirect communication. This is the eye roll, the heavy sigh, the passive aggressiveness, sarcasm, snide comments, whatever it is. But it's when we've oftentimes reached this point of frustration. And it's that natural inclination, to react this way when we aren't willing to do the responsible thing and just be direct, right? So, just know that people can oftentimes, for the majority of the time, they can handle your directness. And it's actually, if you see it in that light, you can see it's like actually much more respectful, right? And, appreciated, to just ask politely when you're not being triggered for the thing that you need versus, being in this exchange, where you have a lot of those, bad boundaries where you're like, and then the person asking, what, did I do something wrong? And then you're kind of like, maybe even a little like embarrassed of your behavior. So then you're like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. So, those are the invitations, I would say, right? The most essential boundary tool is really, again, though, getting clear on that yes, getting clear on that no, right? What works for you and what doesn't work for you. So, I think we talked a little bit about this, but it's like, those times where we immediately regret saying yes, like right after we do. And so a lot of times it is about the pause, right? What can the pause look like for you? And that really lowers the stress and creates that balance in your life. When you can just have the space to reflect on what you want and break out of that pattern of immediately being like the yes man, right? You don't have to do everything that you're asked to do. And again, someone else's disappointment doesn't change what feels good for you and what works for you. And, I think about it as like, wouldn't you want to know? Like, wouldn't you want the people in your life to be really upfront and honest with what they want, what they like, and what they don't like? I mean, I would hate to be doing something, right, that was like constantly pissing somebody in my life off and not knowing it, and they're never telling me. So I think I'm doing this great thing. I have a client who finally set a boundary with her mother-in-law, because it was just this situation where I'm sure her mother-in-law thought she was like this huge help to her, and like was help, wanted to come over and help with the kids and do all these things. And it was driving my client bonkers. And it's like, well, have you ever told her that you don't want her to do that, or ask for like what would be helpful? And she's like, well, no, I mean, and then again, all these stories come up, right? Like, no, it would hurt her feelings, that it would not go well. And so she finally did, and it went great. And her mother-in-law was like, now knows where she stands. She has to remind her a little bit here and there, but it's like, give people the chance, right? Give them the chance to prove you right. If you think like, oh, they're not going to handle this well, like, have you given them a chance? Right. So, yeah, I love that example, because I find that oftentimes, we have these stories built up, right? And then we do it and it's like, oh yeah, that wasn't so bad after all. It actually went a lot easier than I thought. Yeah, so really look for those types of invitations, I guess I would say, in terms of where you need to set these. And so I will ask you guys, it's just kind of a reflection, and you can share or not, just like take it away. But, understanding, hey, Danielle, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for asking.
Welcome to the party.
Thank you. I'm here on time, right? It's
What's
3.
that?
I
Oh,
said,
yeah.
oh, yay. Okay,
Oh,
cool.
you're fine. This is the Better Boundaries Bootcamp. Is that what you're looking for? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We're an hour in, but that's okay.
Oh, okay.
So that's okay. We actually started a little bit late, but you'll get the full recording, but we'll be on for another half hour.
Oh, great. Okay, that's fine then. Thank you so much.
All good. So I want you guys to reflect on, do you feel like you can't get away from your responsibilities in any particular area of your life, right? Internal family, as you said, Jen, with Linda, it's work. But, do you feel like if you set boundaries where you aren't available all the time, that things will fall apart, right? Is not having a clear boundary serving you in some way in this area, and how, So if you guys know, feel free, we can chat now, or it might just be a good takeaway. I'm definitely open to chatting through scenarios, but just looking at, how could this be serving me, right? Like, is it that need to be needed? Is it the validation, the acceptance, right? What is it? What's kind of in it for you? And sometimes I think that can be helpful in giving us a little bit of space, right? Between what we're doing and the why. So next I want to move into what to say. So I think that there is, some nuance to setting boundaries. And the truth is that, as I kind of gave examples to, a lot of people will respect a well-drawn boundary, but it's up to us to draw it. So I think it was Shonda Rhimes who said, no is a complete sentence, right? It can be hard at first and uncomfortable, but it's so worth it. So, when someone asks you to do something first, if someone asks you to do something, taking the pause, right? Reflecting on, is this something that I want to do, right? Is this a yes or is this a no? But then also, if it's a no, simply being able just to say no, right? Like, no, thank you, but I appreciate the invitation, right? So this actually came up with another client of mine, and as an example that she gave is, she's like, well, what will I say? It's like her friend had invited her to go to sushi. She didn't want to go to sushi. And she's like, well, what am I supposed to say? And it's like, just say no. Just say, oh, no, thank you, but I appreciate you thinking of me, But in her mind, she had to make this whole case, right, for what she was doing instead, when she could get together, to offer up an alternative, all these different things. And it's like, just knowing that you can just say, oh, wow, thanks for inviting me, but I'm not able to come. And the fact that you're not able to come is not because you have other plans, right? It just is like, you're not able to come. You don't want to go, right? That can be enough. So that's one of those things that's like, wow, I hope that's empowering. But when we realize that there's no reason to build a case, we're really just honoring ourselves, we're honoring our yeses, and we don't need an excuse. Knowing that no is a complete sentence, it gets a lot easier. How does that feel for everybody?
It's funny to think that that it's really hard to just say no. Thanks, Nancy Reagan. But yeah, it's empowering. It's funny. I'm going through all these different situations and seeing how it would work or what would happen and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I remember when I first started using no as a complete sentence and kind of being like ready, and rarely people would say, well, why not? What are you doing instead? I mean, really, honestly, I mean, it's like, we wouldn't say that. You wouldn't say that to a friend, right? Just as like, oh no, but thanks for thinking of me. It's like, why? What are you doing? Right. So, but again, it's the story. It's a story in our head. That's, in that case, not true. So really like examining that, so other things that can be helpful are things like, using I statements, not in emotionally charged situations, right? Like not in a confrontational way, for example, just stating what you need, right? Like, hey, I could use some time in the mornings, to myself, right? Like 20 minutes would work. That would be really helpful for me. Can you help me with that, husband, partner, whatever, right? And just, asking, right? Direct communication feels so much better. So I think that the biggest fear that most of us have is, what if I draw a boundary and someone crosses it? So we can talk a little bit about, enforcement, when there needs to be a consequence. And I think that this is true to an extent, but we also have to assume that if we ourselves are not great or don't have a lot of experience drawing boundaries, we can also assume that most of the people in our life aren't used to us having boundaries. So we're all going to be a little bit new to it. So, we get to gently at first, right? Remind them of the thing. Again, taking confrontation out of it and being upfront, like, to use the earlier example about, let's say a conversation and, a topic of conversation that is off limits, where it's like, hey, I don't really love talking about, the fact that I don't have a job right now. So every time you ask me if I have a job yet, that doesn't feel great. So I'd rather not really talk about that, And so if then they come back and they're like, oh, how's that job, search going, and be like, oh yeah, I know. Hey, as a reminder, that no longer really works for me. Right. And stating the direct thing again, like, that doesn't feel great. I know I mentioned it last week, but I'd appreciate it if you would honor that. Right. And then it's sometimes it's less of a conversation and you simply just repeat the request, right? People can simply forget. They can need a reminder. But just again, like, hey, I'd rather not talk about that. Like, what's going on with you? Or like, let's talk about something more interesting than my job search, right? Even like infusing a little bit of humor into it. But I think when we are uncomfortable doing something new, something we're not used to, something that we feel a little uneasy about, right? It can take some time. So, be gentle with yourself, be gentle with those around you, and just know that it can feel really scary to step outside of that comfort zone and ask for what we want, to have needs. So don't get frustrated, just continue to flex that muscle. I oftentimes, think about it. It's like if you were to go to the gym, and lift weights after, 3 months of not going to the gym, like picking up that 5-pound weight it's going to be really heavy, right? Until you start, picking it up and moving it around. And then next thing you know, all right, let's go up to the 10-pound weight, and then up and up and up. But you can't just go in and your muscles are going to be a little sore. There's going to be some fear, and that's okay. So just have compassion with yourself, encourage yourself to keep going, keep responsibly communicating, and it will get easier, I promise. Another thing to keep in mind is really, to avoid setting a boundary in a heated moment. We can only live mindfully and draw mindful boundaries, which is the point of this, if we have the space available. So asking for a break in the moment, asking for what you need, hey, I feel like this would be more productive if we just cool off for a minute and come back to it in an hour, right? It's the same kind of space that we are creating between the ask and between the yes, right? So asking for that space, hey, I'm not able to commit to this right now. Is it okay if I check on things and then get back to you? Okay, cool, right? So just continue to like bring space into it, bring the space, bring the perspective that you need into it. And then there will be people, some of that story is a story, and some of that story is probably true in some cases, right? Like they're not going to take this well, right? They're not going to love this. They're not going to honor this. They're not going to respect the boundary. And so in those cases, there needs to be a consequence that is laid out. So the way I like to do it is give them the benefit of the doubt at first. Ask for what you need, set the boundary. Again, if they need some reminding, you can remind them. If it continues to go on, then you have to lay out the consequence. So with the client that I was telling you guys about, whose mother-in-law would just drop in all the time to help with the kids, and it was really intrusive to the woman, to the mother, she didn't have to go this route, but the plan was to say, hey, I'm going to need you to, or what would be really helpful is for you to give me some notice. 2 hours would be really helpful for you to give me notice when you're going to come over to spend time with the kids. If you can call first, text me 2 hours ahead of time. And if that didn't go well, I think the consequence was going to be, listen, mother-in-law, I've asked you multiple times if you're able to give me 2-hour notice. If you don't do that and you just come over, I'm not going to be able to answer the door. I'm likely going to be in the middle of other things that it's really, disruptive for me to be pulled away from. So if you can't give me that 2-hour notice, unfortunately, I'm probably not going to be able just to answer the door. And it's really important for, you to have that time with the kids. So I think if you can, give me the 2 hours, like it'll be great. Right. I had a friend who is late all the time, like 20, 30 minutes, an hour late to things. And it would drive me bonkers. And so I had to draw a boundary with her. And again, I mean, right, like a lot of these things it's not on us, right? Like we oftentimes will, get our feelings hurt or be offended. And it's like, that's on her, right? That's her pattern. That's her behavior. And so for me, it was, hey, if you're going to be more than 20 minutes late, I need you to let me know. Right. And if you don't, like, I'm going to leave. Like my time is valuable and I have other things that I can be doing. And so, and there was a time when I left the coffee shop and she came and that was enough to do the trick. And she's never late just to meet me anymore. I don't know what she's doing in the rest of her life, but and I think that those are the things that people, if they're constantly getting away with this behavior, right? And we're not letting them know and doing the responsible thing of saying, hey, this like really hurts my feelings. Like it's pretty disrespectful. Like I have a busy schedule too. And for me to just sit around waiting for you, that doesn't feel good. Right. That's helpful for them too. Right. So, is that helpful for you guys? I just wanted to give a couple like examples of in terms of having the consequence, which I think you'll be surprised. You will need less than than you think you probably need. Any questions there? Everybody good? Okay. So finally, I just wanted to get into like some of the overall benefits. And I think a lot of these are obvious, but research has proven that people who feel connected to themselves, connected to their needs, live longer, healthier lives, right? Creating and maintaining healthy relationships is essential to our well-being. And we get to move from this place of being overwhelmed, exhausted, stressed out to being people who really trust themselves and are decisive and are committed to healthy communication. So in order to create boundaries, it's important to consider the relationships in our life and what we want. Consider the shifts or the changes that we want. And again, really getting in touch with the changes that we may need to make in order to get our needs met. So it's important to get your needs met. It's important for you to be heard. It's important for you to feel understood. It's important for you to feel seen. It's important for you to points earlier, feel accepted, be validated, right? So looking at ways that we can actually meet those needs ourselves, outside of externalizing it, right? Like hustling for that externally, doing that by overgiving and looking at ways that we can do that for ourselves. So, that may mean, being less available, and that can feel really good. I think, obviously it's been a really rough year, right? 2020 for most of us has not been our best year, but I think that it has given us some more space, right? To practice some of these things, to practice having better boundaries and to have more self-reflection, to really connect inward connect to your intuition. What does my visceral yes feel like? What does my visceral no feel like? What lights me up, right? And what doesn't? Because we want to live a life that brings us joy and not that we're not just hustling and out of all this obligation, right? So being less available, which we have more of an opportunity to do right now than we ever have, to really reflect on what gives us purpose. It can give us the necessary space again to understand what we want out of a relationship, out of our career, out of our life. This is your life, right? It's important to be intentional, to have purpose, and to not simply be in reactive mode to everyone around you all the time. It's about really being honest and taking responsibility for our part in it. So, boundaries, I believe, are the key to self-love and to, really treat others with kindness. It's, not how we have probably thought about boundaries, before. And they are kinder than the alternative. They create respect, and again, wouldn't you appreciate knowing what was okay with people in your life and what wasn't? Like none of us would be wanting to do these things that are annoying the people in our life when it's so much easier for them just to ask us for them. So, really encouraging others to clearly state their boundaries. And when we feel unclear about what's okay and what's not okay with others, being able to ask them, like another great example, like with COVID, but it's like, hey, I want to check in with you on something that I'm not really sure where you stand, but what's your comfort level with us using the bathroom when we come over for drinks in the backyard, right? Next weekend. We have no problem coming home if that feels better to you, but I just want to, be on the same page beforehand. Right. So being just able to open up those lines of communication and get really clear, what's okay, what's not okay. And, what are your limits? What do you want? What do you need? And just remember that, being loving is being real, authentic, and courageous. So I'd love for you all to leave here tonight really considering, a lot of these boundaries, that it may be time for you to grow yourself within those internal boundaries and within your relationship. So Brene Brown said, when we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we can feel used and mistreated. This is why we sometimes attack who they are, which is, far more hurtful than addressing a behavior or a choice, right? So it's so powerful. It's all about, again, finding that balance really between over-functioning and an appropriate level of helping others and being really generous. So
I just want to tell you, thanks a lot. I do have to set a boundary because I have to something else I have to be at. So
I love it.
I'm going to take off at 4.
Okay. Yeah,
All
that
right,
sounds
bye.
good. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye, Linda.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, so that's really all I had just in terms of programming, but I did want to make myself available. I'm good for the next 12 minutes to just talk, if there's anything that you guys have for me at all about any particular questions that you want to dive deeper in, or any scenario that you'd like to talk about. I'm definitely open for that here. Or we can talk about, things that were helpful or in takeaways if you guys don't have anything specific. Or I can just give you 12 minutes back.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up, Jen?
How do you long-term friendship and the person is kind of changing? So the idea of, is this a rough patch or are you just very different from before? Like it's more of a sense of kind of pop in and then here's a dump on something and then I'm going to go away and I might pop in 6 months later and dump some more. So it doesn't feel reciprocal, but it had been for a very long time. That idea of grace and kindness to let people go through what they have to go through versus what you talked about of feeling taken advantage of.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So what do you feel like you need?
Consistency more. Like I always think with a friendship, it's both people showing up. It's not, hey, I haven't talked to you in 6 months, but look at what's wrong with my life.
Right. Yeah.
Or a lot of times I can end up not on purpose in a mentor relationship. And while I'm flattered, I don't get something out of that. That's giving. So it can always be like someone comes in to siphon something off and they go on their merry way. And I think I'm a person like that. I noticed that coming up with me a lot. It's like you want to give and you want to help, even when it feels good. But it's that sense of just pull.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. No, those are both good examples. So with the consistency, it's like, if you, could you just ask for, because a lot of times I feel like these can seem like really big things. Like we have to have this like come to Jesus about like our relationship, our friendship of, 20 years. Have you asked her for like what you want on like a micro level? So let's say like she pops in every 6 months, but if you would be able to say, hey, would you, I'd love to hang out with you next week, or, even just like, what would you like to be doing with her between those, like in those gaps?
More contact points that the person's going through depression.
Okay.
So it's very just a dump. And it's more the sense of, if you're going through a hard time, that's of course awful, but it's just, there's no reciprocity at all. And I don't think the person is capable of it right now. So it can feel like kicking them in the spleen while they're already down on the ground in a ball.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and that's interesting too, right? Because I feel like in this case, this may be more of that kind of internal boundary that we had talked about.
Yeah.
And I think for you, it's really important too, just, again, like I loved your class, on
Thanks.
being an empath, and
I got to watch my own self. I'm soaking it up. Like, and I have
yeah,
such sympathy and empathy of, I know what it's like to go through a hard time, but you don't just want to go attaching to people as they go by. Do you know
well,
what I mean?
absolutely. Yeah. And you don't want to be carrying that burden also, like as an empath, right? You don't, those conversations, I find myself in those conversations from time to time too, where it's like, oh my gosh, like, and you can just feel like the energy shift. So I think it's like, again, you want to be available, right? Like going back to the example I gave with my friend who broke her leg. It's like, of course, right? Of course I want to help my friend who broke her leg, but what's my bandwidth? So I think for you, it's like, that's what you need to kind of reflect on a little bit, is like, what is your bandwidth? What works for you? Because we know what doesn't, right? We know that this drop in and like dumping all over you doesn't work for you. So maybe it's, and I'll just kind of like spitball some examples. Maybe it's, letting people know, right? Like this is one that happens to me often as well. It's like, I get stuck on the phone, or I could get stuck on the phone for like an hour, I mean, like a long period of time. Right. And there are those repeat offenders where you can just say like, hey, how's it going? When they call you, just to let you know, I've got about 15 minutes. I'm available for the next 15 minutes. And then I need to go. And the reason you need to go is because you need to protect your peace, right? And yeah. So you don't need to get into, because again, I think we can get pulled into that, like, I have to go to the dry cleaner to like before they close or what, like, it's like, no, no is a complete answer, right? So you just being able to say like, hey, it's good to hear from you. I'm available for the next 15 minutes and then I have to run. What's up? So that you can be supportive, and then in turn, asking for what you need, right? So like, what positive role does this person like play, or could she play in your life? Like doing something fun.
Yeah, I hear you. It's not, I think a lot of it too is, especially I liked what you talked about earlier, as women, we're not taught this generally.
Yes.
We always have to please and take care and be softer. And it's getting better. I think this generation has it easier than the past several, obviously. But it's that sense of, I end up just thinking, well, that person had a bad day. And then by the time I'm ready to express myself, I'm like a 30 instead of a 3.
Yes.
And it's a lot to, because my upset becomes disproportionate because it's 10 levels below.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's something that I would, again, like kind of connect with your intuition on, and maybe reflect on a little bit. Like, what do I need? What do I need out of this relationship? Right. And then being able to ask for that. So have that internal boundary with like, hey, I know that like I can really like be like probably available for like 15 minutes, whatever it is, like 15 minutes is the number I threw out, but like understanding what that bandwidth is for you, and asking for that. And I think too, like with friendships that are really long term, and a lot of times with our family members also, like, there are seasons when maybe we are giving more, right, than we are receiving, and that's the ebbs and the flows of life, and that can be okay. But I think that's probably the biggest thing that jumps out for me with this situation is like, you definitely don't, nobody wants to like get everything dumped on. But especially like if you're trying really hard to like, protect your energy and that inner peace, and it's already, you can easily take on the feelings of others. I think it's even more important. Does that help you, or were you looking?
Yeah, because I always look at it also, if I feel like I have to cord cut after a conversation, something bigger is going on.
Yes.
Right. It's because then I'm going to be resentful. I don't want to flinch every time a phone number comes through.
Right. Yeah. And so again, I think it's that space, right? Taking the space. So like start with 15 minutes or whatever number you come up with, and see what feels good, right? Like, does this feel good? Like, oh, that feels pretty good. Or like, oh no, I think I need to dial it back even more, and just kind of play around with it. And so then you can, again, like have that internal boundary with yourself to be able to say like, hey, this is how I'm going to best protect my peace. And then just do that. Right.
And I think sometimes it's also guilt over the sense of, I'm not who I was 25 years ago. And sometimes some things need to change. And it's like, and some people stay the same and some people don't. In that sense of, this just doesn't serve me anymore. And I always jump back to, but this and this and this, that's not happening now. And it has been for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a good point. And I think that can be an adjustment, again, for other people, right, in our lives when we now have boundaries.
Yeah.
And again, it's not going to be, unfortunately, boundaries aren't this just switch that we flip and it's like, oh, now we have boundaries. It takes the practice, right? We have to wait. But it can be uncomfortable for some people when we finally are standing up for ourselves. And there will be people who won't love that either. And again, like that's on them. That's their responsibility. Our responsibility is just to speak our truth lovingly. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah. Anything else you guys have? Jessica or Daniela? Danielle, I know you're a little late. So if there's anything that jumps out to you that you're wondering about, or I think I kind of asked in the beginning, why everybody, like if there was one thing you were hoping to take out of the class, and of course you'll get the whole replay, but if there's anything that you want to share, I'm happy to kind of weigh in too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I don't want to keep you guys. I came because, I'm just deeply trying to establish a really strong foundation in boundaries, because I look back and you just realize like, oh my God, like 75% of my problems could have been avoided if I had known about this. But I did want to say, listening to that conversation, I've been doing this thing that's really helping me. I don't know if this will help anyone else, but and maybe you do this already, but boundary rituals for myself. So I'll actually set up like a circle, like cast a circle, and like light like a black candle or whatever color, and in that moment sort of be like meditating on letting go of shame, guilt, and self-doubt, because those are usually the three things that really get me stuck. So I'll try and like breathe that out, and then hopefully once that's gone, it'll usually help me settle into sort of a more almost like righteous intuition or something, because there is like a sense of righteousness that I have found I actually need in order to set a boundary with anybody. And that's a feeling I'm not used to, feeling like righteous, but yeah.
I love that. That's beautiful. I'm going to use that myself. That's a great share.
Oh, good.
Right.
Cool. Great. Yay. I'm glad I could help. Yeah, I've been obsessive about it. Or not obsessive, but like I'm trying to learn it.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love that. Yeah, that is so great. Because again, I think, we kind of talked about this earlier, but a lot of times it's like that knee jerk, like be the yes man, right? And so it's like not even having like the space to understand like what's working and what's not.
Yeah, right? I've like physically hurt myself before trying to do something for someone so quickly that I didn't even like think about my physical body in that moment, I did have one question. I don't know if we'll have time for it, but I guess I'm wondering if there's any resources that you guys know of about like non-violently actually cutting off friendships when needed.
In terms of resources, nothing comes to mind, but I'm happy to talk about a scenario if you have,
well, it's not really, my friendships have sort of been dropping off naturally as I've been getting better with boundaries. But I do have friends who are going through similar things, like who are like this one friend is like specifically asking me for advice on that, and like his and he's got like I don't know like 5 energy vampires around him, and I'm just like I don't know. But yeah. I wasn't sure if there were any resources. I would just point him there, but
none that I can think of.
Christiane Northrup, the doctor, the OBGYN, she's also very metaphysical. She has a book specifically about energy vampires, and she has a fantastic course at Hay House Education University, whatever it is. Very, very helpful.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah, I do like someone that comes to mind. I mean, there's no specific resource. Her name's Elizabeth D'Alto. And so she has a podcast. It's called Truth Telling by Elizabeth D'Alto. And she does like a spectacular job of ending relationships that don't serve her and really like protecting her peace. She is very boundary driven. So I'm sure you could search through some of the podcasts, do a keyword search and probably come up with some helpful things there.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate that.
What was the last name?
I'll throw him those
Dialto,
names.
Dialto.
Okay.
Well, good. Well, I know we're a little over on time, so I will let you guys go. But thank you so much for coming. So again, my name is Sarah Seeger, and I will hopefully be doing more of these classes. I do them on my own and then sometimes here with Joy. So if you guys are interested in seeking me out, my handle on Instagram, which is the easiest, is Sarah Seeger Co.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's SarahSegerCo. And then my website is just sarahseegercoaching.com. But yeah, if you're interested or enjoyed this talk tonight, you can follow me and catch all the other things that I do out in the world, and or maybe I'll see you here again. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate just spending the time this afternoon. And for those of you that I was late for, I apologize for the technology.
No worries at all. Thank you
I won't
so
even
much. It's been
apologize for the
great.
technology. I'll apologize for myself and the mistakes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.
It was really nice to meet you guys.
Happy
Nice to
holidays.
meet you.
You too. Bye, Danielle. Bye, Jessica. Bye, Jen.
Bye.